fact number one, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contains more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact number two, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. Here's another example. This shows notes from FBI investigators that describe Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump, where he bragged to Trump that, quote, "This is a good one." Now,
I know this clip's been sitting around for a bit, but I kept coming back to it, and I finally decided I had to bring it to you, because what happened in this exchange between Jasmine Crockett and Attorney General Pam Bondi is one of those moments that doesn't lose relevance just because time has passed. Crockett didn't even bother asking Bondi questions. She said flat out she wasn't going to, because she didn't believe she'd get real answers. Instead, she turned to a Democratic colleague and asked three simple yes or no questions. Is raping children wrong? Is killing random citizens wrong? Is a sitting president enriching himself wrong? All three, obviously wrong. Then she pivoted to something much heavier. Documented references to the president in the Epstein files, notes from FBI investigators, and a direct question about why DOJ resources seem to be going toward arresting journalists, instead of prosecuting people connected to Epstein. And when pressed on it, Bondi didn't answer the substance. She redirected to a list of unrelated immigration cases instead. I'm Caleb Morgan. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button, because we do not flinch and we do not let that slide. Let's get into it.
thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, I'm not going to ask any questions of this witness, because this witness has revealed that she has no intentions of answering questions. But instead, I'm going to ask some very basic questions really quickly of my colleague, Becca Ballant, if she will answer: right or wrong, raping children?
Wrong.
Right or wrong, killing random citizens?
Definitely wrong.
Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States?
Definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you, because I probably never would have got that with our witness. Our witness, who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions. And then we also have this objection that we use as lawyers called non-responsive, when a witness fails to actually answer the question. But nevertheless, let me address the survivors, because that's exactly who they are. They are not victims, they are survivors. Let me say thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice. We are currently the laughing stock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ, as we see kings and queens falling everywhere around the world. But we don't know the basics of right and wrong in this country, because it's not about partisanship. And that's why I applaud Thomas Massie, because he's the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. But nevertheless, let me keep going. My Democratic colleagues have been attacked this entire committee hearing. They have been lied on, and frankly, the American people weren't looking for that. They were looking for answers about the corruption that they see coming from this administration. In the written testimony of this witness, of this particular witness, she stated that when she took office, she had two main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice, and second, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. And at your direction, DOJ has arrested Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. And I might add that y'all actually had a judge that rejected y'all for trying to arrest Don Lemon before, just like the grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Kelly, just like a grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Slotkin, just like the case against Tish James was dismissed and the case against Mr. Comey was dismissed. I completely don't get how it is that you're sitting at the top of DOJ, because you don't seem to be good at your job. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting these journalists. In fact, we know after Georgia Fort and Don Lemon were arrested, we know that there were homes of journalists that were raided. We know that threatened prosecution against students protesting your actions and forced tech companies to remove apps used to track ISIS activities. But let's circle back to you protecting pedophiles and creeps, because I want to talk about the president and his possible involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't know what the president might have done with Jeffrey Epstein, but unlike this administration, I believe that facts matter. So let's talk about the facts. Fact number one, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contains more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact number two, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. Here's another example. This shows notes from FBI investigators that describe Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump, where he bragged to Trump that, quote, "This is a good one." Now, I'm not saying that the president is a pedophile, but there is a lot of evidence in these files that suggests that he's very close friends with a lot of men who are pedophiles. What's crazy about all of this is just that this is a big cover-up, and this administration is engaged in it. In fact, this administration is complicit. But there are numerous others, like how the DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in the investigation of the rogue agents who have murdered American citizens, or how the DOJ seized voter data from Fulton County in an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections, or how federal agents have Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe and your agency killed the investigation, or how your agency is ready to give the president a $230 million payday, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution is clear. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. The fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history, an attorney general who has prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over the law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. And Mr. Chairman, I will yield.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized. Excuse me, gentleman from Kansas, the Attorney General, former Attorney General, Mr. Schmidt is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Bondi, thanks for being here. Did you have anything you wanted to say before we talk?
I do. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, my friend, for many years. I find it interesting that she didn't even want to try, Congresswoman Crockett, to ask any questions, because she certainly did not condemn her leader, Hakeem Jeffries, for taking money from Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was convicted. And I will be brief to give you your time, Congressman. This is what she didn't want to talk about. Texas, from Cuba, convicted, homicide, arson, weapon offense.
Convicted.
You know,
so what are we
Estrada,
talking about? Convict
Texas,
some of these perpetrators
homicide.
that rape these women that are
Chairman,
sitting
time
behind you,
time
that
belongs
you
to the
refuse
gentleman
to even
from
acknowledge
Kansas.
they are here.
Time belongs to the
Texas.
gentleman from Kansas.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a few seconds
You
back
bet,
to make
you
up
bet.
for the yelling? Thank you. General,
Thank
did you
you,
have anything
Congress.
further to say?
Texas, convicted of homicide. Cecil Joseph, from Dominican Republic. Texas, convicted for kidnapping, rape. Khalid Khan, from Afghanistan. That's why they want to talk about Epstein and not what's happening in their own states.
Let's start with the structural move Crockett makes right out of the gate, because it's genuinely one of the sharpest tactical choices I've seen in a hearing like this. She announces on the record that she's not going to ask Bondi a single question, because Bondi had already shown throughout the hearing that she had no intention of actually answering anything put to her. So instead, Crockett turns to a colleague and asks three of the most basic moral questions imaginable. Is raping children wrong? Is killing random citizens wrong? Is a sitting president enriching himself off his office wrong? And she gets three immediate, unhesitating answers. Wrong, wrong, wrong. That's the whole point. She's not trying to extract information. She's demonstrating in real time how simple these questions should be to answer, and highlighting, by contrast, that the sitting Attorney General of the United States couldn't be trusted to answer them the same way. Then she widens the lens to something much bigger than one hearing, a pattern of DOJ resources being directed toward arresting journalists, naming Don Lemon and Georgia Fort specifically, while, in her framing, aggressive pursuit of people connected to one of the most infamous trafficking cases in modern American history has stalled. She points out that a judge had already rejected the DOJ's attempt to arrest Don Lemon once before. She notes that grand juries had rejected similar DOJ actions against sitting senators. That's not rhetoric, those are documented legal outcomes, cases where independent judicial bodies push back on the department's own actions. When you line those up next to each other, the question Crockett is really asking is simple. Where exactly are the department's priorities? And who decided that journalists were a bigger threat than the people named in Epstein's files? And this is where the hearing gets genuinely heavy, because Crockett is careful, deliberately careful, about how she frames what she says next. She doesn't claim Trump has been convicted of anything. She doesn't claim proof beyond doubt. What she does is point to specific documented material, roughly 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago across thousands of pages in the Epstein files. FBI investigator notes describing Epstein bringing a young woman to Mar-a-Lago and telling Trump this is a good one. Accounts of Trump spending time with a young woman Maxwell had presented to him. Crockett's own words matter here. She says explicitly, I'm not saying the president is a pedophile. What she's saying is that there is a documented volume of association that, at minimum, demands serious independent scrutiny rather than silence. And watch what happens the moment she asks the DOJ to actually engage with that material. Bondi doesn't walk through the documents. She doesn't offer a rebuttal to any specific claim. She pivots hard to a list of immigration-related criminal convictions in different states, implying Crockett should be focused on those cases instead of Epstein. Now, to be clear, those are real, documented convictions, and violent crime is a legitimate area of oversight. But notice what that pivot actually does in this moment. It doesn't answer a single question about Trump's documented presence in the Epstein files. It doesn't explain the DOJ's resource allocation toward journalists over trafficking adjacent figures. It changes the subject entirely, and when the head of the Department of Justice responds to specific documented questions about the president by redirecting to a completely different topic, that's not a rebuttal, that's an evasion, and it reads as one, regardless of your politics. Here's the distinction that actually matters, and it's worth being precise about it. No prosecutable evidence and no documented allegations are not the same thing. Crockett isn't claiming a legal case has been proven. She's pointing to a paper trail, investigator notes, file references, documented associations, and asking why the Department of Justice isn't treating that paper trail with the same seriousness. It's apparently applying to journalists and political critics. That's not a partisan gotcha. That's a legitimate question about institutional priorities asked by someone with subpoena power, backed by documents that are now part of the congressional record. And that's really what makes this moment worth revisiting even now. Crockett's closing line, that Bondi will be remembered as one of the worst attorneys general in history, wasn't just for effect. It was a statement about what happens when the people running the institution meant to pursue justice without fear or favor start looking like they're running defense for the most powerful person in the country instead. Once something enters the congressional record, it doesn't disappear. The documents referenced in that hearing are still there. The question this clip leaves you with isn't really about one exchange, it's about whether anyone with the power to act on that record actually will. So tell me, do you think Bondi's pivot was a legitimate answer or a dodge? And does revisiting a moment like this change how you see where things stand now? Drop your take in the comments. If you want more of these hearings, broken all the way down, no spin, no letting it slide, hit subscribe. I'm Caleb Morgan, and I'll see you in the next one.